Joined now by Vicki McKenna for our weekly Culture Cast feature. Vicki, thanks for joining us today.
Great to be here.
Well, we have an interesting situation where Joe Biden was caught on film in New Jersey. He was going there to take a look at the damage done by Hurricane Ida. And instead of talking about their property, people were screaming at him over fences about how he abandoned people to die in Afghanistan. This is a really remarkable story. And it was, from my perspective, a great thing to see these patriots who were less concerned about their property damage than they were how the American president has abandoned Americans overseas.
I give my life for this country. You guys should be ashamed of yourselves. Leave no American behind.
Ronald Wildrick buried in Arlington, 2011, December 11th. For what? He lost his life for what?
It's a good start. That's all I can say. It's a good start. I saw the chanting, the F Biden chants at the football games over the weekend as well. But I think what we do in the United States is we're really good at heckling. We heckle well, and so there's some satisfaction in seeing an incompetent buffoon who is president be heckled this effectively. However, Duke, I point everybody's attention to Paris. And I don't normally do this, compare the United States to France unfavorably, but they have been protesting for 8 weekends, close to 100 to 150,000 people per weekend, demanding that their freedom, that they get their freedom back. So when you have France more aggrieved about losing its freedom than the United States, something's seriously wrong. And again, I'm glad that the people in the United States are feeling comfortable because in pushing back against Biden, they're pushing back against the establishment cancel culture left. And so that is really great. But again, it's not going to amount to much if people don't put that heckling to action.
Well, and it's not just France. I sent you an article I think you may have seen as well. It's Canada. I mean, you've got two of the most, for lack of a better word, overtly effeminate leaders in their leadership style. You've got Macron, the socialist, and you've got Pierre Trudeau's sexually confused son, right? And these guys talk about the most ineffective, squishy liberal, pajama boy leadership. And the Canadians, of all people, started to induce, they're rioting, they're in the streets, they're throwing stones, they're actually taking
at
some
their
kind
president.
of... At their president.
Yeah.
So
yeah, you're seeing the France and then the progeny of France, react in a very visceral way to the restrictions, to the lockdowns, to the incompetence, to the fecklessness of their leadership, to the weakness, to the sacrifice of their nation's, pride on the altar of woke social justice. Maybe we're just a little bit behind. Maybe we're going to see this. I don't want to see riots in the United States. I want to see large-scale, effective protest with effective civil disobedience. And I say that with a caveat. Everybody who commits an act of civil disobedience has to understand that is against the law, and you have to suffer the legal consequences of that. But to have effective pushback in the United States that actually produces change, that is something that I think it feels like we're far away from that right now.
Well, there is a codicil to what you just said. We conservative Americans, it's exactly a perfect definition of what you just said. But we just went through a year and a half of radical left-wing riots in the streets that were called nothing more than protests. And look at how much. And look at how much.
It wasn't even civil disobedience.
No, it wasn't.
Was just overt criminality, just wanton criminality.
And yet, look at how much progress the left made through those riots. I mean, almost everything you're seeing going on today in corporate America with its selling out to social justice is a result of those violent protests. And so to the conservatives of America, to the Christians of America, to those of us who are Republicans or middle of the road, it sends you one very strong message in this country. If you get out there and you do damage and you are an unstoppable force, you're going to get your way. Whereas if you play it nice, if you go the Tea Party route, right, where you show up on Sunday afternoons for 3 hours and you leave the park that you protest in cleaner than you found it, and you're all 65 years older and above, that's going to be called an insurrection. But what Black Lives Matter and Antifa did is called social justice.
Exactly, and it's called protest. And if you show up at an event, and what conservatives do and the Tea Party people did and the Trump people do is they show up for rallies. Rallies aren't protests. Rallies are rallies. Protests actually require you to have a point and a demand. Nobody in the United States fears conservatives. And with all of the lying narrative about January 6th, there is not a single person in Washington, D.C. who feared any conservatives showing up. This is about trying to figure out ways to keep us down, to make us fearful of showing up en masse again. But no one fears us. The reason why corporate America caved after the Black Lives Matter riots, after the Antifa riots, it isn't even so much that they liked the demands, because there weren't any. It was because they feared the mob, and they were already predisposed to believing in the same sort of progressive sensibilities. So we're up against people who don't agree with anything we say, and they have no reason to fear us whatsoever.
After the break, we'll take a quick turn back to Joe Biden's heckling. And believe it or not now, he's blaming the heckling on people who don't understand global warming. He's getting screamed at about abandoning people in Afghanistan. And the problem is climate change after the break.
Of course.
Back again with Vicki McKenna for the second half of our Culture Cast. Vicki, so we talked about Joe Biden getting heckled for his Afghanistan pullout in New Jersey when the president just went there to survey the damage and to put his hand on the shoulder of people. And the thing that gets me about this, there's still not a single shred of evidence still that the hurricanes have anything to do with global warming. There's not a single reputable scientist who will say there's any connection between global warming and hurricanes. And yet, when Joe Biden was finally called out for being screamed at, his response was to accuse those families, those people who are yelling at him, of not understanding the science of global warming and how serious it is.
Walking these neighborhoods, meeting the families and the first responders, seeing how folks are doing after this destruction and pain and another devastating storm is an eye-opener. The people who stand on the other side of the fences who don't live there, who are yelling that we're talking about interfering with free enterprise by doing something about climate change, they don't live there.
That's right.
They don't live. They don't understand.
So how bizarre is this? You've got people whose property has been devastated by a storm, and instead of caring about, what's FEMA going to do for me, what they want to do is they want to let the president know what they think about the despicable debacle that is Afghanistan and the United States genuflecting on the world stage, at the feet of radical Islam, at the feet of people who loathe and despise everything we stand for in this country. That's what they're mad about. Mind you, their roof is ripped off. But they're mad about what's going on in Afghanistan, and good for Americans who are mad about that. And Joe Biden to respond, you're just so dumb. You just don't understand that, if only you understood the science of global warming. We just had a story last week declaring that the single largest public health threat on the planet is global warming, and that the hurricanes were caused by global warming. And Duke, if only we had passed that ridiculous stimulus package that does absolutely nothing for infrastructure, but eliminates single family zoning, why we would have stopped Hurricane Ida. I'll tell you something, it seems so absurd and it sounds almost comical, like it's a punchline to a really dumb joke. But there are people who have been raised in K-12 public education, whose parents have not monitored anything that they've been exposed to, who've gone on to university, who have never been taught to think critically at all, who actually believe this stuff. And the scary thing is, more of them are in power and embedded in power in the United States than the people who are skeptical.
Yeah, you're absolutely correct. And it's not just in power in the United States, it's behind the scenes. Journalists, lobbyists, big corporations. The thing that's so odd about this is that we are being lied to on a daily basis on a scale that just 5 years ago would have been impossible. It would have been impossible to slip this by the American people. There were enough quasi-Democrats with a conscience who would have called this out. Now, what price? Already the mainstream media is burying the lead in Afghanistan. Already they've moved on. The Hollywood celebrities have also said, we stand by Joe, he did the right thing. That means, again, leaving women to die. That's the right thing. for Hollywood. And media's moved on and forgotten about it now. The tech companies have been sort of pushing back on burying some of these leads. Now the pivot, and we said this for a long time, as the grip on COVID chaos and paranoia begins to wane, as it becomes harder for the left to use that as a reason to control the American people, the next big pivot was going to be to climate change.
Necessarily. And in order to maintain the control, the levers of control that were seized under the auspices of protecting us from COVID, that was necessarily going to pivot to climate change as well. So, but you're right about the declaration that we have been lied to in ways in magnitude that none of us have ever experienced before. Those are the things that we read about that were going on in East Berlin, in the Soviet Union, in North Korea, in Cuba. We're not used to that here. Here's one that was just recent. You had Senator Schumer actually say all Americans who want to be out of Afghanistan are out of Afghanistan. Mind you, you have former special forces going in and trying to rescue people, American citizens with American passports, children, women who had been encouraged to step out and to declare their own rights under the Taliban when the United States was holding that country, and being murdered. Executions being done door to door. And you had Chuck Schumer saying everybody who wants to get out is out, and has planted the flag of success, even as there are people right now languishing, not able to board planes and get out of the country, being held hostage by the Taliban. It
is amazing how the left has created basically a vanishing hole. Anything they don't like, they can dump in it, and it's forgotten forever. Yep. And we will not speak about it. You speak about it, Twitter's going to ban you, Facebook's going to ban you. Meanwhile, we're going to be talking about January 6th for the next 100 years, or until Republicans have been gotten rid of altogether.